Before I go any further with the details of the trip that I'm going to take to Germany, you of course need to get to know the background to how I've got where I am today. Many of you have already seen some stuff that I've posted on the internet, some detailed descriptions of how I have come to research the Lancaster bomber and its crew through a poem that my mum wrote. Just winding the clock back a bit, 2014, mum was 88 at the time. Every Saturday morning I would take her shopping. It was a little routine we had. She would talk to me about the same things, about the war, her experiences. You'll see it in the short story I wrote on the website for JB141, all of which is made up purely from mum's memories of her walking to work, sharing the chocolate that her brother Reg got, that was the original Reg, got in terms of rations because he was working in Cadbury's before the war, etc., etc. And it's worth just reading it. It'll take you 10 minutes to read it. And it's just a nice little collection of all of my memories of mum's memories. So anyway, this was a normal Saturday, like any Saturday morning. Mum had spoken to me about playing table tennis, learning to play table tennis in the office. And she was settling down. I made her a cup of tea. And I was just going around the floor near her chair, picking up the odd pill which had been dropped and left there. And I saw a small yellow exercise book, a thin paperback book, basically, lined or faint. And in it was a collection of mum's poems, and she was a prolific poet, and she was transferring a lot of them from one book to another, just tidying things up, making preparations as you do as you get older. You do want to get your house in order, and she was just trying to get some of her poems together. And I read this one poem that was written for a strange title. It was from a grateful British subject, which was a very boring sounding poem. But as you read it, Mum had written a poem celebrating the actions and lives of 7 young bomber crew, Lancaster bomber crew. And I asked Mum why she'd written this poem. And she explained that in 1943 she was 17 years old, and her friend Mary Stanley, who was a similar age, working with her in the tax office, was going to have her 18th birthday party in 1944, early 1944. Mum, being Mum, decided to write them a poem as a birthday present to present to them at this 18th birthday party. I don't know whether Mum had much money at the time, but it's the sort of thing that I can imagine Mum doing. And it would potentially mean an awful lot more receiving something like that, in my humble opinion, than any present that money could buy. So she sat down and she wrote this poem. But she said, unfortunately, the crew had died by the time of the party. So Mum never gave them or never read them the poem. And I thought, wow, that's an incredible snapshot of 1940s Britain from my mum's perspective, in that life was so fleeting that it was snuffed out and a promise made was never delivered. So I thought it did also, in the back of my mind, there was the tiniest inkling of suspicion that maybe this was the fantasies of a 17-year-old girl approaching her 18th birthday, madly in love with Nelson Eddy in the cinema. But I put that to one side and thought, I must record this for posterity. So I took a photograph of the poem, and strangely, And I'd never done this before or after. I said to Mum, "Tell you what, Mum, could you read it to me?" So I recorded it and took a photograph of the poem. Fast forward 8 years. No, 8 years, sorry, 6 years. 2020. It was my wife Julia's 60th birthday and her father's 90th birthday. So I went back through the thousands of photographs that you find on the hard drive of your computer to try and find some photographs of David, Julia's father, and photographs of Julia to share with the family for his birthday. And I found one photograph of David, a lovely photograph, but I also glanced a copy of the poem. Oh, fantastic. I'd forgotten about that. We celebrated David's 90th birthday. It was a lovely day, and Julia's 60th as well. But I got home and thought, I wonder, with the power of the internet, whether or not we could do some research on the poem to see if we could identify the crew. The poem, after all, gives the name of the aircraft. It gives the names of each member of the crew. So it should be a relatively straightforward thing to do. Relatively straightforward. How easy can these things be? Well, it turns out I went to Facebook and the response from there was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. In particular, one individual who I'll say thank you to now, which is Di Ablewhite, who is one of the unpaid researchers for the International Bomber Command Centre and has done a tremendous amount of work in bringing all the information together for me. Wonderful woman, hardworking, relentless, passionate, skilled at bringing information together, a detective and an angel all wrapped into one. So thank you, Di. So Di got hold of this and she saw the poem. So let's have a look at the poem.